Our guest is Greg Carlin of Zebra and Giraffe. He's a songwriter, vocalist, frontman and multi-instrumentalist. Plays live guitar and keyboards. Behind the scenes he also plays bass and drums in studio. He's also a photographer and the co-creative director of the strong visual identity that Zebra and Giraffe presents. Greg, hello.
Hello.
I want to start off with Knuckles, which is the new album that you're working on. But the reason I want to start there is not just because it's a new piece of music, but because you're doing so much more with your songwriting in terms of, it seems to me, trying to get a bit more personal. There's a bit less distance than some of the earlier material.
That's interesting. Yeah, the songwriting has always been the major focus for me. It's my favorite part of the whole process. This time we worked with a new producer, a lady named Shy, and she was basically the woman standing in the back with the whip. And if something wasn't good enough, I had to rewrite it. I think some of the choruses I rewrote 10, 15 times at least. So it was a lot of hard work this time around. I put a lot more thought into it, and she just helped me. She made me ask questions about music. Why are you saying this? A lot of the time before, I'd slip in a few things. I wasn't really sure what they meant, you know, artistic, poetic license. And I was like, you know, some of the stuff you can go back to me and I don't know what it means, like that kind of thing. This time, every single word, every phrase, every musical note, everything that's in there has a purpose, and I think that's the main difference.
And does that mean that when you're performing it, it's a different thing than when you're performing the older songs because it's more meaningful?
Yeah, it's also more current. It's easier to perform songs that still mean something to you and you can still remember. You know, the stuff like from the first album, I was in a very different space in my life. It was 6 to 8 years ago I wrote some of those songs. I can't even remember what space I was in. I was a lot younger. So it's harder to access the space, you know, you were in when you wrote those songs. I mean, I can see why some artists, you know, performing songs 20, 30 years later have to go back to that space when they're, you know, nowhere near in that, you know, I mean, who's a good example? Like Guns N' Roses or Slash, you know, or Anthony Kiedis even. Like performing songs that you wrote when you were living under a bridge and on some heavy heroin. You know, go try and access that space in your head while you sing that. Otherwise, it's not authentic. So that's hard. It's always nice to perform songs that are newer. I think the audience never realizes that, but that's why for us.
At your fairly recent Opi Kopi gig, during some of the older songs, I'd worked my way from the front of the audience to the back, and pretty much as far as you from stage, as far as your eye could see, there were people singing the old songs. So you got to deliver them.
Yeah.
Is that hard to do?
No, I think where the fun part in the old songs comes in is that the crowd sometimes knows them. And something like Arm Yourself or The Knife, it just makes you feel good that these people are singing the song back to you. So the new song is a fun thing for us to play, but everyone stands there and they don't know what's going to happen next. So when you hear a song for the first time, you don't know what to expect. And I think when you go to a live show from a band you love and you know what songs are coming, and you hear a song you know, it makes you feel comfortable and you get excited by that. And it's nice to know what's coming next. And I think that's what's fun for the crowd and what's fun for us.
One thing I've noticed about Zebra and Giraffe is that everyone in the band is really into watching live music, and not all bands are, because understandably it's something that you do 9 to 5.
Yes.
What keeps you interested in seeing the bands that you enjoy?
I think the fact that so many international bands are coming here is really exciting. There was a long period of time where just no one seemed to come, and it was very few and far between, and whoever was coming you kind of had to go and see because they were the only band coming that year. So you'd go and see bands you didn't really like. Now it seems like almost everyone's coming, and you have to kind of choose because it's quite expensive. I remember from when I was a kid watching Placebo and Skunk Anansie at the Standard Bank Arena. That was like one of my favorite shows ever. I remember standing right in the front and just being blown away by those two bands. And you know, ever since then, over the years, there have been bands that have done that for me. It's Prodigy did that, Thrice in London. More recently, I went to watch Nine Inch Nails in Australia, which was kind of like a dream come true. I spent a lot of money on that little trip, but it was awesome. It's hard as a band member to go and watch live bands because you tend to look at it from a different angle. But something like Nine Inch Nails was a total like fanboy moment. I was just loving every second of it. The concert felt like it was 2 seconds long. I just wanted it to go on forever. It didn't, unfortunately.
When you're on stage, do you ever have a moment where you break out of remembering what you've got to do next with the guitar, or how you're cueing things with the band members, and feel that somewhere in the crowd is a 16-year-old version of you going, hey, wow, love this band?
On stage is the strangest experience, and I've never felt 100% comfortable on stage, especially when we started. I didn't know what the hell I was doing out there, to be honest with you. I remember my first ever show was with a band called White Lie, and I swore so much between every song because I was so nervous, and I was just cursing the whole show. My mom was sitting there, my dad was there, and they were so embarrassed. And they still remember that show. It was so bad. It was in the Blues Room in Joburg, and we opened for Parlour Tones. And yeah, I mean, since then I've come a long way. And more recently, Shy has also taught me a lot of stuff about live. And as I was saying, it's a strange experience being on stage because you're faced with so many different, what's the word? You're faced with like a crowd right here looking at you. You're faced with these lights. You've got to try and perform a song. You've got to try and perform a song with energy. You've got to try and perform a song and mean it. Plus you're trying to play the guitar, and sing kind of in tune if you can. So there's just so many things coming at you, and you've got to try and remain as calm as possible, because the minute you seem nervous or out of place on stage, the audience picks that up. And they don't know why. They're not going to see you, your guitar's out of tune. They're not going to hear that. They're not going to hear if you played the wrong notes. But if you feel uncomfortable on stage, they know. It's like an intrinsic feeling people get. It's the same with recordings. If you're recording, a lot of the old recordings, I was trying to get it too perfect. I was trying to sing perfectly in tune and perfectly in time, and it's not about that. People, they can feel that authenticity in the recording and on stage. So I've come a long way for my live performances. I've still got a lot of work to do. I still sometimes have this, like, I'm on stage playing and then I'll go into, you go and drift off. You're like, what am I doing? Like at Obi Copy, there's like 12,000 people in front of me. I'm like, why am I on stage playing? What note is next? And your body just remembers it. And yeah, so I do have those kind of moments. I don't know if I look into the crowd and see me, I guess. But yeah.
When the band comes off stage on a big thing like that, there's obviously an elation at having performed the show, but are there also critical moments where the guys are saying to one another, could have done that, let's work on this?
Yeah, it's when you come off stage, it's rare that like every single person has an amazing show. That happens. I mean, as I said, there's so many elements. That's the word I was looking for, elements, not a hard word. There's so many elements and things that can go wrong. Inevitably, someone has something that goes wrong. Alan will come off stage and go, oh, this was wrong. And I was like, I didn't even notice. So when that happens, it's really amazing. When everyone's really excited about the show. Some shows, we all come off and we just hated it. And you'll speak to the audience members afterwards and they're like, they loved it, it was an amazing show. So it's different for everyone, and it depends on the crowd, depends on each member.
In terms of the way that you put the shows together, how much, because it appears very spontaneous when you're standing in the crowd.
Does it? Good.
How much of that is very carefully planned? I mean, clearly you have a set list, but
yeah.
Do you deviate off that? Do you read the crowd?
Yeah, we do tend to read the crowd in some stages. We also I tend to, like at Obi Copy, I dropped out a song because I just couldn't sing anymore. The dust in that place is just terrible, and we all know this. I've still got it in my nose, as you can probably hear. But we got to like, say 3/4 of the way through the set, and I could feel my voice wasn't going to last. So we dropped one of the new songs, and I'll just quickly tell the band, But as I said, people don't really notice they notice strange things on stage. I remember watching Folds, and the guitarist's entire like amp section and keyboard like went off. It just lost power. And because I'm a musician, I noticed he was like, looking around, and then eventually he was just standing there going like this and throwing his arms around, and he threw his guitar down. No one in the crowd knew. They were still dancing and singing because the band was good enough to just carry on. He eventually just walked off stage, and then he came back on like a few minutes later. But so people don't notice, those kind of things.
We spoke about lyrics in Knuckles and the way that you've been working on the songwriting. You wrote a very personal song on Wisest Ones. In fact, a line from it gave the album its name, the song Sons. What is it like for you performing this song where you say some pretty hectic things about your family and the upbringing or family things that happened?
It's funny because my dad comes to a lot of the shows. I'd say he's probably at 50% of the shows. He just loves coming, he loves watching us.
Do you look at him when you say, look at our father?
It's the hardest thing. It's one of the hardest things to do. And there's a show we played, the first show we played this year. My mom and my dad were there. And it's weird for me to perform that song when they're there. I feel bad. I feel like, because my parents know it's about them, obviously, and I say some hectic things about both of them, but I mean, it's the truth, and they both know it, so it's not like I'm, making up this new story. It's just really hard to sing it while they're there, and it often like makes me choke up a bit on stage, so I try not to think about it. I try not to imagine them in the audience at all. Especially in the acoustic shows, because the acoustic shows, you really focus on the lyrics and the words and getting every word across to the audience, and they're listening so intently. So yeah, it's really hard. But I still, I would still write the song again.
So I'm glad you mentioned the acoustic show there, because one of the things that your big stage show does is it has so much focus on sonics and how the different sounds are crafted and transposed from a studio environment into being this just massive, complicated set of sounds that's happening. But when you're doing the acoustic show, it's just you and guitar and the lyrics. How hard is it for you getting into that much more intimate space?
I honestly get so much more nervous for these acoustic shows, just because there's people sitting as close as you are to me in the acoustic shows. At a big show, someone is fairly far away and you can see the expressions on their face, but you've got a guitar and you've got an amp and it's loud and you're like, yeah. Here I've got my acoustic guitar and a piano and the vocals, and it's very exposing and it's really tough, and I get so nervous for those shows. Once it starts, it's fine, but you really have to get into an honest, introspective kind of headspace for those shows. A lot of the time we've played shows where the audience, it wasn't the right venue or something like that, and you really have to fight the audience because of the level of the sound, which is probably the worst show you can have. We had a couple of those in the last tour where the people in the audience aren't really there to watch you, they're there to, drink, and it's not the right venue. And that's just horrible. It's horrible having to try and sing a really personal, down-tempo song and try and sing it loud or make it more upbeat so people can dance or something like that. It's ridiculous. I hate those kind of things.
But you got to fight through them. It's part of the deal.
It's part of the deal, and some people are there to see the show. So we chose this venue. Yes, it's not perfect, and there's a lot of people making noise, but there's 10 people standing here that really want to see the show. So you have to play for them. You can't just now try and make it into a karaoke show, which it sometimes leads towards when people, are jumping up on stage.
Tougher at an acoustic show when people jump on stage.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if they have a phallus plaster of Paris to their hand.
Tell the story of so that otherwise that's going to come across as a pretty weird thing. But you played a show.
We played a show, and there was a bachelor party booked at the same venue, which we thought was a good idea at the time. I don't know why, more people, more money, but ended up that the bachelor had this giant glass thing. I don't know even know what it was. And he had a plaster of Paris to his arm, and he was really drunk in a bikini. And then he proceeded to dance in front of us for the whole acoustic set, and then try and like shove this thing in our mouths. And it was terrible. It was just like one of those moments where I looked over at Alan, I could just see he was so angry, but we couldn't stop because we were playing. It was at a family member's lodge, and there were people there that had paid to see the show, so you can't stop. But it was just terrible.
So we'll get back to another kind of show you play, which is the support slot show.
Yeah.
But with regard to something like that happening, in the old days of rock and roll, so before indie music happened, before the genre that I guess we put Zebra and Giraffe in, which is alternative music, if that kind of rock and roll craziness happened, hey, the band could respond to it. You mentioned Guns N' Roses earlier. They might punch you in the face if you did that. I'm guessing Zebra and Giraffe won't do it. So what else has changed with the old denim rock and roll into the dress in black alternative?
Sure, a lot has changed. I mean, that's quite a big question. I think the main thing that people don't realize is the amount. There's a lot more bands now. There were a lot less bands there, and you were exposed to a lot less bands. I used to find out about bands in Hit Parade, and it used to come out once a month, and I used to see 3 or 4 new bands, and I used to go and try and find their CD at Look and Listen or something like that, or whatever it was called, CD Warehouse. And I would find, I remember finding Papa Roach CD, and I was the first person to find the CD, and I thought it was amazing. Now that discovery for me doesn't happen at all like that anymore. You find something on the internet that someone shared on Facebook. There's a lot of stuff hitting you all the time. So that's one of the biggest changes I see. And also there's a lot less money, from a band side, there's a lot less money being put into artist development and stuff like that. Back then people were buying a lot of CDs, bands were selling tens of millions of albums, the big bands. I suppose they are in some senses today, selling downloads like that, but it's a lot smaller. And we all know the crash of the major record companies. That's had a huge effect on it. There's just so much that's changed. I don't really know where to start with that question. But for me, I think, just the way music's consumed changes everything. And I think artist development is totally different now, where before a record company would take a small act and put a whole lot of money behind them and build them up into something. Now you're expected to do that yourself. A record company will look at you and go, okay, you've got 1,000 fans on Facebook, you've got you play this many shows, let's leave them for a while. We don't want to put in too much money into that right now because we don't have the money. So they'll wait for you to build yourself up, build your own fan base up, and then suddenly they want you. And maybe at the time you don't want to go with them, so who knows.
So why do you still do it? Because it is,
music.
I mean, it has always been difficult, but being in a band now is a much more complicated and complex thing than it used to be, and it's not just about the late night parties and the girls. So why not?
I mean, it was never really about that. That's when we started, that kind of partying and that whole thing. It lasted for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then we were done. We got over that. For me, it's just been about writing songs. I love making things. I studied art. I love drawing. After 4 years of studying art, I hated art because it was too much about concept, and I got into video art, and I didn't know what I was making. If I go and watch my final video project, it's the biggest pile of crap. I don't even know what it's about. It has some close-up of my grand's face, of her skin. It's some bullshit that I made up about the barriers and blah, blah, blah. I wrote a thesis on genetic engineering affecting gender. I mean, it's just... Anyway, I hated art after that. I really did. I got lost in the conceptual side of it, and I really enjoyed just making drawings. And it's the same with music. I love making songs. My favorite part is sitting in my room, writing a song, getting it to the point where it sounds like a finished song, and then just putting my headphones on and jumping up and down and pretending I'm in front of 10,000 people. That's my favorite point. And I remember doing that with a song like Arm Yourself, thinking I think this has the potential to do that. And it's nice to, have played Oppie Koppie recently and actually have done that, come full circle.
Does that mean you're saying it's not your favorite part when you really are in front of the 10 or 15 or 20,000 people?
Sometimes it's my favorite part. As I said, a live show just has so many elements, things that can go wrong, things that can go right. It's just, as I said, it's always been tough for me, but there have been shows where it's been perfect and it's been absolutely amazing. And it's all about, I suppose it's about the person, but it's also about being totally relaxed, being in control, and having something that is good. For us, we've always tried to push the boundaries on how much we spend on production and how big the show looks and stuff like that. And a lot of the time we forget about just actually playing our songs. So yeah, being on stage is, as I said, it's tough. The best part for me is being in the studio. I love that. If I could become a recording artist, I would, but that's pointless. You can't just record your songs now, you have to play them live.
So with Zebra and Giraffe as a collective, I know I've read quotes from both Mike and from Alan saying that the 45 minutes when they're on stage is the reason they do it. That's why they love it. So is it that kind of interplay that means the four of you work together?
Look, when you're on tour, it's that hour, that 45 minutes is by far the best part, because the rest of it is absolute shit. It's horrible. It's like, it's fun. The fun part, again, of tour is actually traveling. Like, I love being on the road and just traveling and seeing the country. But packing up and setting up gear and carrying stuff and staying in weird cabins in the forest or in horse paddocks, it's just weird. It can be horrible. And so all that you're doing is you're waiting for that show to happen, and that the 45 minutes is like an absolute massive release. It's awesome. And on tour, playing clubs is actually really fun. Those are probably my favorite shows. The big shows are actually quite detached, I find. As I said, you can't see anyone's face. So you kind of expect this mass emotion, or like hands in the air, to show that people are into it. Whereas at a club show, you can kind of feel people and you can see people and you can see the movement. And that's what I love. I love small, sweaty clubs. There's a club in PE called Pool City. We've played there every single tour, and we've had our biggest audience there for a club show. We had like 700 people in this tiny little room. And it was amazing. I love playing there. It's sweaty, it's by the end of the show, you're completely drenched. But that's amazing. That's what I love.
Maybe you need more ballads so you can get people to hold their lighters up at the festival shows, and then you'll know that they're already there.
I need to do that. I think we're going to do that on this tour. We're going to do dive, acoustic, or not acoustic, but stripped down within the big set. I think it could work. No one has lighters these days. Everyone's got twisps. Just turn on the lights.
You have the app on your iPhone, the lighter app.
Yeah,
there we go.
App.
You spoke earlier about making things and about art, and maybe you've abandoned some of the theory part of it, but you still take photographs when you can.
Yeah.
And you're a photo hoodlum. What is it about taking the pictures that you still enjoy?
Photos were a very quick way to come up with an image. It's drawing took me a long time, and I fell in love with taking photos a long time ago, and I eventually bought myself a decent camera and some lenses and just started taking photos for fun. I've always just done it for fun. I love taking behind the scenes photos of the bands. My previous girlfriend was a model, so she loved me taking photos of her, which was quite nice, because usually people hate you taking photos of them. You take a photo, can I see it? Oh, I look fat. It's deleted. That happens all the time. So she at least enjoyed me taking photos of her. So I suppose with her, that I kind of really did a lot of photography. Really grew my passion for photography, and now I still just do it for fun.
Cool. I wanted to ask about the support slot gigs, because it's a very important part of a band's development, but it is also kind of weird being on somebody else's show, The Killers or Snow Patrol, whoever it is.
Yeah.
What is it like doing those shows?
The Killers is a good example, because we had I think I had possibly one of my worst shows and my best shows 3 days apart. The first show with the Killers, we experienced that typical, if you're in the industry, you know about how opening bands are treated by the main bands. The main band is it's their show. They're not going to be shown up by the opening band, no matter what happens. No matter if it's Linkin Park supporting, I don't know, a band playing their first gig. The main band is always going to sound better than the opening band, and that's why the volume is always softer. There's never any lights, you know. So we experienced that when we played with the Killers the first time, and their gear arrived late, so we went to have a sound check. So we got on stage and everything was wrong. Like, it was just an absolute disaster. I hated every second of that show, and we were so uncomfortable on stage. I think they can pick up on that kind of thing. And then the next day we got our sound check for the Friday show, and then the Saturday in Cape Town we had probably the best show. I think all of us agree that that's one of the best shows we've ever played. A lot of the people were stuck coming in because there was a massive traffic jam, and I think people were just grateful to get to the show. And when we played at sunset, and it was just absolutely beautiful. It felt like everyone was there for us. It felt like we were playing to 30,000 of our own fans. So yeah, it can be very cool.
And I believe as the photo hoodlum, you've sold some work?
Yeah, I got signed up to a website in Japan called Subject Matter, and they sell photos in Japan, and all over the world actually. And I sold my first photograph the other day. Very excited.
So you're going to can Zebra and Giraffe and become a photographer? Because they would disappoint a lot of people.
No, not at this stage.
Splendid news. So I want to go back to something I raised earlier, which was playing support gigs. And that's obviously something important for you to do as a band. You played a series of gigs with the Killers, and some were cool and some were not so cool. What's it like having to play with other bands where it's your crowd, but only for the first part, and actually everyone's kind of there to see everyone else?
It's, you know, those big shows, obviously you make, you know, you're playing to an audience that you might not play to normally. Something like the Killers it's a similar type of sound. So you're playing to people that you may not have reached before that could become potential fans. But with that Killers show, we had one of the worst shows ever and one of the best shows ever 2-3 days apart. We experienced that thing where, you know, the main band kind of sabotages, if it's on purpose or not, the opening band. Their gear arrived late and we didn't get a sound check, and we walked up on stage and everything was just totally wrong, and it was terrible. We were so uncomfortable. And you're playing for 40,000 odd people and it's just horrific, and you're like, oh, what am I doing on the stage? I don't want to be here anymore. But then 2 days later we played in Cape Town, everything was great, and it felt like we were playing to 40,000 of our own fans. And people still come up to us, you know, today and tell us about how they saw us at the Killers show. So at shows like that, it's amazing. It gives us, as a young band, or back then young band, opportunity to be exposed to all these new fans. And you get to play on a massive stage with awesome sound and awesome lighting, so that's always a plus.
6 years on from you putting together this collection of things that then turned into collective memories, 4 full albums later, a bunch of South African Music Awards, an All Africa Award. How is the impetus of the band in terms of keeping it going and taking it to the next level working? How do you keep on regenerating what you need to do? In South Africa, it's really tough. Any band that has some initial success is always going to hit a glass ceiling. It feels like the ceiling's really low here, and it's, for us as a rock band, alternative rock band, it's just because there aren't that many people that listen to alternative rock music. Your audience is really small. So you're only pitching your music to a really small amount of people. So you're only going to get so big. And once you hit that level, where do you go? What tends to happen in South Africa is that you tend to become more generic to try and reach more people. So you go, well, okay, I've kind of saturated our target market now. I need to reach more people. I need to get on different types of radio stations
because the gigs have dried up and only the one radio station is playing our song. How do I do that? The easiest way and the best way is to make music that's more generic, that reaches more people. And that tends to happen to a lot of bands in South Africa. They try, their sound gets watered down, and they end up not really sounding like anyone. And their first album is always the best, and it sounds like the most like them, and the rest, they just keep on sounding more like other people to try and spread, get a big audience. And I think that's been a really tough thing for us to try and avoid. And what we should have done 3-4 years ago is go overseas, but we didn't. We had a few big member changes. Carlin and I are the only original members in the band, and only now we've really got the band behind us and the album behind us to go overseas. And we're going to do that next year, but we should have done it a lot earlier because we hit that glass ceiling pretty quickly. We rose quite fast on our first album, and then we just went dish and then stayed there, and we're like, where do we go? And there is nowhere to go in South Africa. You can keep touring the same 5 to 10 cities over and over again, but people don't want to see you 3 times a year. I don't want to see my favorite band 3 times a year. I see 9 Inch Nails, I see them once. I would love to see them again. A 3rd time, maybe. A 4th time, probably, maybe. 5th time, no. I don't want to see them again. It's just one of those things. And we expect people to watch us 3 or 4 times a year. And then people don't come to your 4th show in the year and you're like, why aren't they coming to my show? Because they've seen you already. So
do you think you've got what it takes to crank it into an international market where you need to be unique when you've been working so hard to cover as many bases as you can?
That's I think the biggest problem, and that's I think why no South African there's how many bands have broken out of this country? 2 or 3. It's you go over there and you've already generified your sound to a certain point, and now you're in a market where you need to be as unique as possible to cut through, and you aren't, so you just disappear. And that's why something like the Antwoord cuts through so well, is because it's so unique overseas. No one's seen anything like that. And that's why they are really the only act from South Africa that's really broken through in a big way. And as an alternative rock band, that's pretty hard. I mean, we're going to have our work cut out for us because we've got an interesting name. That helps. But sound-wise, you really have to do something different because there are so many bands over there. And as I said before, with this day and age, so many bands, and they're all getting thrown at you, and the playing field is almost leveled. Everyone can put their video on YouTube. Everyone can put their song on SoundCloud. So that's going to be really tough for us, and it's a challenge we're willing to accept and we want to do now because we've got to the point where feel like we've given South Africa our best shots and we've had our successes here, and we need to move on.
What do you think is going to make that work? What are your secret weapons or the strength that you're going to draw on within the band?
Good hair. It's all about the hair. I think being in a band, what I can say for South Africa is it's a great place to learn your craft and to hone your craft, because you can make mistakes here that no one really knows about. You can make massive screw-ups in South Africa and the rest of the world doesn't really pay much attention to it. So it's a great way. We've made mistakes over the past 6 years. We've made some stupid decisions, taken some really bad photos, which Google still holds on to, trying to delete them. But it's a great place to hone your craft. And then I think especially me and Alan, we've been doing this for 6 years. We know a lot about the industry, how to tour, and we've really just got a solid base now to go overseas. And I think that's going to be one of our biggest, secret weapons, I suppose, as you call it. And this new album, I think the songs are the best we've written.
And is it kind of a wing and a prayer? Or do you think you've got a foundation that'll push you into at least making a successful career there? Because it doesn't just have to be about everything up in lights.
I don't even know. Going overseas is... Look, we're not the kind of band that's going to have a success like I was mentioning, the Antwoord. We haven't got that kind of totally over-the-top crazy thing that no one's ever seen before. It's going to be something that we go over there a few times and start building up an audience. People that get into the music and the songs And it's going to take us a while, but we want to do that. So it's not going to be something where we go over and next month we're massive in all over the world. I don't think that's going to happen. It's more of a long game, like we did here. We built it up. So I'm excited to do it.
We're looking forward to seeing it happening. Last two questions. On Knuckles, there are some songs that are kind of personal. They seem to have a bit of a love story element creeping in. What's that about?
What's that about it? That's about being in love, I guess. Well, not that I haven't been in love before, but I tended to focus on the bad parts and the breakups and stuff like that. It was easy to write about. It's so much. Try and tell someone to draw a picture. Tell me to draw a picture, and I'm going to draw you something that's weird and strange. I'm not going to draw hearts and cheesy stuff because it's essentially is cheesy, and it's hard to avoid that being cheesy when you talk about love. There's only so many things that rhyme with love, and it's a really hard topic to write about convincingly. It's easier for me to write about the breakups. That emotion seems to be right there, and it seems to be easily accessible. Whereas now I've finally come to terms with the fact that being in love is okay and being happy is okay. Not the tortured artist. I've been through that for the last 6 years. I don't really need that anymore. I can always go back and draw on those emotions. They're still there. But now I moved to Cape Town, I met someone, and I'm actually happy. So it was nice to actually write a song that is kind of happy and has some, like a little silver lining through it, or some light at the end of the tunnel, which nothing in the past ever really had. And it's actually been quite satisfying because it's hard to sing a song like Suns, which is just really about the past and quite depressing, but it's actually quite nice to sing a song like Dive that makes you feel good and makes you like quite happy, and the person's in the audience or the person's at home and you're excited to go back home to them, or you're excited to see them afterwards and ask what they thought of the song, and it means something to them in a good way.
A very important part of Zebra and Giraffe's sound is the quite complicated layering of all sorts of different sounds in any given song, and in the studio using all the kind of tricks you can in the studio to create those sounds. Why are you guys so focused on that? It's actually become, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. And I think as the years have gone by, we've realized that we've sometimes put it a bit too much in our songs. And it came from a combination of Daryl and me. And it really comes down to, when I look back now, it's focus, and it's okay, I've got a song and there's only so many melodies a person can listen to or hear at one time that's going to hook them. The strongest songs, the best songs that have been written are very simple, and their melody lines are, you can remember them instantly. If you're asked to remember your favorite song, you can remember the melody line quite easily. And you don't remember that weird keyboard part in the back and the other weird guitar and the other weird guitar and the weird bass and all that stuff together. You don't remember that. You hear the main melody. Now, when I started, I wasn't that good at songwriting. I was, just starting, and I was trying to get as many melodies in as possible. And if you listen to that first album, there are so many counter melodies and things going on and stuff I try to cram in there to make it better, but it actually just makes it more cluttered and worse, I guess. So as the years have gone by, Daryl, our producer, who's been with us from the start, we've tried to cut down on that and really focus on, yes, we put lots of layers in to create, it's more like an atmosphere, but not as many melodies in. And that's been hard because you have to write better melodies then. You can't just write 8 average melodies and put them over each other. You have to write 1 or 2 really good ones. And that's what the focus has been on this album, is, okay, your vocal melody is 80% of the way there. Let me throw in a keyboard to try and fix that. No, fix the vocal melody. That's been really hard. So I think, yeah, it's been there from the start, and it's kind of one of those things we're trying to work on, but it does create our sound to a certain extent, and we try to keep it there in the
atmosphere and adding all little weird guitars that just fill up the space that you don't really hear. I think that's one of the good parts about it. But yeah, it does create, as I said, zebra and giraffe sound.
Greg, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
And all the best with Knuckles
Thank
and
you.
the overseas and everything else.
And the overseas, thank you.
Cool.